Earthquakes are Mother Nature's way of telling us humans that we're helpless in the face of sudden tremors in the Earth's crust. Hang on, as here are the scariest earthquake moments ever caught on camera, which will prove how scary and unpredictable things can become in seconds. Earthquake on a boat. Two friends were out fishing when they heard an intense sound of shaking. They both looked at each other in fear of not knowing what was happening. The sound seemed unidentified at first, but then one of them considered it as the shaking sound due to the quake and decided to sit up on the ship. Thankfully, it wasn't a severe jolt, and they managed to survive it. Swaying buildings. The terrifying moment of observing swaying buildings during an earthquake is one that will haunt many for years to come. The sound of creaking and groaning as the building rocks back and forth is harrowing. The fear of the unknown, whether the building collapses or not, pervades the mind of anyone inside. Live broadcast. The horrific moment of anchors running during a live broadcast on a roadside during an earthquake was one filled with terror. As the ground shook and earth rumbled violently, the anchors scrambled to keep up with the frantic pace of their recording. Their voices barely audible over the sound of the quake. In a matter of minutes, the city was turned upside down. Parked cars. The shaking moment of the parked cars during an earthquake can vary depending on the severity and intensity of the quake, as well as its proximity to the parked cars. Generally, parked cars experience a similar shaking motion to that experienced by the people inside of the car during the shaking. Swimming pool. The moment of water shaking in the swimming pool during an earthquake is frightening for those who are swimming, as the sloshing of the water causes strong waves and currents that makes it difficult to maintain the balance in the water. Terrified classroom. The classroom was filled with terror as the walls shook and the ground trembled. Students screamed in fear and ran for safety, diving under desks as the earthquake raged on. The chairs and desks rattled as the ground shook and the walls oscillated. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Vibrating buildings. While peeking outside the office window, a woman observes a swinging building. At first, she imagines that it could be because of her overworked dizziness. Upon close observation, she realizes that it's a mild quake that's shaking the huge building. She still remains satisfied because of the fact that huge body buildings are less vulnerable to the quakes. Rumbling store. The CCTV footage records the violently shaking floor, rumbling and groaning like an animal in pain. Shelves and displays are shaking with every shift. The shopkeeper and the customer ran in terror for the exit, desperate to escape the chaos that's unfolding around them. Oscillating pool. The pool water churned violently during the earthquake, the ripples spreading across the surface of the water in a wild and chaotic pattern. The tremors of the quake shook the pool, making the once still water ripple. The water splashed against the side of the pool, and waves moved against each other in a dizzying spectacle of movement, like a storm raging across the water. Swinging traffic. The moment the quake struck, the roads and cars on the busy road shook and rattled. Some of the cars even stopped on their tracks, as the quake caused a loud rumbling sound that echoed throughout the city. People were left in shock as they were abruptly confronted by the power of nature during the humdrum of their luxurious lives. General store shiver. The sudden quake caused all the items inside the refrigerator to come crashing to the floor. All the inorganic products spilled over shelves and onto the floor, making it impossible to tell what had been into the refrigerator just moments before. It was a complete mess, and it was clear that it is surely going to take some time to put them back in order. Fluttering clothing shop. The moment of quake was like a sudden jolt of electricity, shaking every item in the clothing shop. The lights swayed, the racks of clothes rattled, and the shelves of folded items shook. The whole store seemed to shudder as the quake rumbled through, leaving a lingering sense of unease in its wake. The salesman left feeling unsettled and a little frightened, unsure of what to do next. Rambling doors. The floor trembled as the building shook, sending vibrations throughout the office. The desks and chairs rattled and squeaked, and the windows and doors rattled and creaked. The walls groaned and moaned, rumbling as if in pain. The quake lasted for what seemed like an eternity, but was over just as quickly as it started. An airport quiver. The ground beneath the airport suddenly began to shake violently, knocking people off balance and sending them running in fear. People desperately clung to anything they could to try to maintain their balance, while others made a mad dash for the exits in an effort to flee the area. Panic quickly filled the air as the shaking grew more forceful, sending people into a frenzy of chaos. Glitching outdoor cafe. The footage shows a bunch of people gossiping and resting outside the cafe when a sudden wave of quake caused panic among the people. The ground shook violently, and a sound of rumbling filled the air. Some ran for safety, while others grabbed onto the benches to keep from falling. Pool in misery. We've all heard Uncle Aristotle saying, "Nature abhors the vacuum." Then why this swimming pool? The pool's waving water is an indication of something fishy the grandmother is planning. It's scary and dangerous to confront a quake while resting in a pool, as you'll have no control over a wicked wave that could slam you against the pool wall. Why did the dude in the end come out? Why did he climb into the pool? It's still a mystery to solve. Riding roller coaster. The moment the ground began to tremble, the roller coaster swung wildly and all the riders screamed violently. No one was ready for this powerful display of nature, especially when they're enjoying their life to the fullest. Thankfully, the quake ended soon and no one was injured. SAVIOUR nurse. The earthquakes always like to shake you up, but what a heroic nurse a CCTV camera recorded during Turkey's 2020 earthquake. The nurse is being hailed as a savior after she ran through a trembling hospital to rescue children stranded in rooms. Scared dog. The dog was sleeping calmly when, all of a sudden, a strong jolt hit down the earth. The quake was so powerful that it shook the room and its furniture violently, causing the dog to run away in fear and misery. The magnitude was so strong that it left a lasting impression on the swinging furniture, as well as on the dog. Tremored restaurant. During an earthquake, the moment of a restaurant in an airport can be one of tremendous fear and confusion. The shaking of the ground, the thought of the airport collapsing can be overwhelming. In such conditions, safety should be the higher priority, and people should evacuate the restaurant as soon as possible. The quaking footage displays the cruelty of nature and the worth of one's lavish business. Dancing office. The office was filled with the usual hustle and bustle of a television newsroom. Reporters and editors were scurrying around to cover the latest news story. Then, the ground began to shake. Papers flew off the desks and chairs swayed back and forth in a chaotic dance. In that moment, the newsroom was filled with a strange stillness, broken only by the sounds of the earthquake. Thundering hotel lounge. In the hotel lounge, during the earthquake, the hanging chandelier was swinging back and forth, its glass crystals tingling and glinting in the shift of light. Tables and chairs were shaking and rattling. It looked like a never-ending quake as it was rising in its magnitude. Freaked out cat. Earthquakes do raise the fear in human beings, but have you ever seen an animal freaked out by earth shaking? The shaking of the room during an earthquake was so intense that everyone instantly filled with fear and ran outside to escape. The frightened cat followed them and ran to flee. The walls and furniture seemed to be shaking and swaying, and the floor beneath them felt like it was rocking. Dangling site of construction. The moment of shaking machinery on a construction site during an earthquake was terrifying. The ground suddenly started to shake, and the machinery and equipment started to move and vibrate violently, and you can hear the loud clanging and banging of metal parts. The heavy equipment is swaying and moving. In the distance, you can hear the rumbling of the earthquake and the sound of the earth shaking. Shaking ground. The ground was trembling, cars rocking back and forth in their parking spots. The shock waves were traveling through the asphalt, making the roads and cars alike shudder. It was an unnerving experience, and you could feel the poor people's hearts racing as they waited for the shaking to stop. Flooding roadway. The CCTV recording showed the road shaking violently as an earthquake struck the area. Cars were swaying from side to side, and many pedestrians were seen running for cover. Some of the cars stopped, while people started coming out of their houses in an open space. The quake seemed to last for quite some time. A strike of Earth. The footage showed that when the earthquake tremors started, the drivers were parked in their cars waiting. As soon as they felt the tremors, they ran out of their cars and away from their parked spots in a panic. The footage captured the fear and confusion of the drivers as they ran away. Quake ambush. The aftershock of the quake jolted through the crowd of people standing outside the buildings, causing many to stumble and lose their balance. The ground trembled beneath their feet, shaking them to the core. The fear of the unknown was palpable in the air as they looked around trying to make sense of what was happening. The police helpers started making calls in order to hold a check on the devastation. Quaking streets. The shopping street was full of people bustling and enjoying their day, when suddenly an earthquake began. People began to panic and started running in all directions. The street quickly emptied as the tremors continued, and people sought safety by moving aside from the standing buildings. Shopkeepers left their shops in fright and ran to seek safety. The noise of the earthquake and the people running filled the air, creating a chaotic and frightening atmosphere. Oscillating road. The night sky was filled with the sound of creaking, cracking, and clanging as the roads and trucks shook beneath the force of the earthquake. The CCTV cameras that had previously been still and silent were now abuzz, capturing the surreal and alarming scene of the earthquake's violence. The shaking was relentless, creating a sense of fear and chaos. An occupied, shuddering road. The road was usually busy with cars and people going about their daily routines. But that day, it was almost chaotic. As they went about their business, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath their feet, causing cars to swerve and people stumbled, some even falling to the ground in fear. In that moment, they were all united in their fear and confusion, the only certainty being that the ground beneath them was still shaking. Quake disturbing pool. How can you expect a better outcome if you dare to make a pound on a skyscraper? As the skyscraper trembles, the pound of water is released, rushing down in a torrent of awe. The power of nature is on display, reminding us of the fragility of our plans. Trembling sight. Even the masterminds among us can be crushed by nature's display of power. The moment the quake struck the construction site, the ground started to tremble and shake, causing engineers to become worried, considering the insane level of tremors that shook the very foundations of the structure. The engineers are eagerly waiting for the quake to come to a complete halt to begin assessing the degree of destruction left behind. Waging CCTV. Just by the intense wriggle of the CCTV camera recording in Iran, you can know that these people were nearly done for. It reveals the helpless condition of folks promptly running out of a shopping mall for their survival. Some of them have tried to enclose themselves in cars for a safer side, while others are under the shock of where to go. Trembling house. Earthquakes aren't necessarily always as sinister as they may seem. Take this one for instance. A California home surveillance camera picked up live footage of a swinging lounge that miraculously escaped from any severe damage, suffering minor breakage. The shivering earth caused everything to sway with might and main from their steady position. The universe was in favor of the homeowners who were absent at the time of the quake. Earthquake during makeup tutorial. That's what's called a groundbreaking makeup tutorial. The California girl was recording a makeup tutorial when she was suddenly struck with a huge intensity quake. Even though she was guiding a nice and decent makeup tutorial, nature has already planned to put a Joker lipstick on her. She got lucky that she wasn't testing her eyeliner at that moment, or it could have turned into panda eyes. Ground that cracked up. While earthquakes may always give the doom and gloom vibes, Sometimes it begs to differ. In March 2011, a man, while taking a walk in a park somewhere in Manila, Japan, observed a spectacular sight of splitting ground. The fact that a man remained firm to his position, the constant pull from the jiggling of the earth caused the ground to crack into halves and spill water out of it. Terror of the quake. By digging into the CCTV footage, you can estimate Mother Nature's power to break into your routine. An abrupt jolt of the quake forced the riders on a busy road to stop for a while. The Master Nature shook the ground, and with that, every man-made necessity started shaking off. The quake's impairments could be judged by the vibrating electric pole sparks that crumpled down and the swinging trees that are on the verge of uprooting. Panicked workers. Two workers, while gossiping with each other, were unaware of the danger they were going to confront. All of a sudden, an abrupt quake of enormous intensity hit the building, shaking it whole. One of them tried to stand up by balancing his feet on the ground, while the other one remained still. As the quake caught intensity, both of them rushed towards the door, while the poor cat raced to get to shelter. Dog in dismalness. This footage may arouse the sense of sympathy for any dog lover for leaving the dog alone in misery without any shelter, but the dog owner has already cleared that they left the dog outside their porch because the dog's owner will be there. It's amazing the instinct and awareness animals have, as the dog, being famous for detecting disaster, pre-hand woke up before the max effects of the quake. Quake caught the backbiters. One can't go without saying that these women were surely gossiping against the mighty nature, which got interrupted by the powerful jolt of the quake, which could be considered as a warning sign. The magnitude was intense even for a nanosecond, as it caused the children inside the house to run in terror towards their mothers. Shaky roads. The CCTV footage of roadside during an earthquake in Gurkha is no less than a hair-raising sight of miraculous escape after a brutal attack of nature. Nature appears to have been a cruel stepmother, as it shivers the whole earth cheek by jowl. The road traffic paused, and people started running out of buildings in fear of being crushed under them. Airport confronting quake. The earthquake recorded footage of the airport of Tajikistan is a striking reminder that nature is what happens to us while we're making other plans. While waiting for the arrival of their dear ones, a group of Tajiks at the airport got struck by a high-intensity quake. Some of them, being more sensitive to the adversities, ran bluntly at the same time. Others were calm in the turmoil. Deep cuts are always painful, and here's footage of a brutal quake that cracked the road into gazillion pieces. This video is taken by a drone in Turkey and Syria. It seems like a high-magnitude quake has not only affected the sentiments of effectees, but also shook the structures of the buildings and roads. The whole town has been the embodiment of devastation with the blockage of roads, but the passionate assistance of the traffic police has somehow made it convenient to safely move out of the ruptured roads. It feels like it'll take an eternity to overcome the damage the quake has caused. Thank you very much for watching the video. Do like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon not to miss any of the upcoming amazing videos. Until next time, adios.